So, one of the requirements I've set for you for your assessment coming up is an annotated bibliography. And the idea behind that is that for your PIP project, you're going to be doing a heap of research. And I know from my own past experience and from a lot of students' past experience, you might find something really useful, go, that's great, I'll put that away, I'll save it for later. Come back in 2 months' time and go, I have no reason why, I can't remember why I saved that source. I have no idea what's in it. I'm gonna have to read it again if I wanna make it useful. So one of the things that professional researchers, people who work at universities do, is they create for themselves annotated bibliographies. The idea is when you collect a source, you record some bits of information about that source to help you understand what's in it and why it might be useful for your research project. So, what I'm going to show you guys is a list of things that you should include in your annotated bibliographies. In short, it's a really brief paragraph that you're going to write after the normal bibliographic information like the author's name, URL, that sort of thing. And in that really short paragraph, you're telling yourself a few things. Firstly, what the source says. So what the author has written in this piece of research, right? Secondly, why it's valid. So is this from an author who is working at a university? A lot of people have cited this paper. They're a prominent individual. Why is it worth reading? Or you might say, this source is potentially problematic because it's from an organization that's not reputable, or it's from an author who has had false claims made against them or something like that. So you want to make a statement about its validity. Then you want to make a note for yourself about how this is useful to me. So I found this great piece of research. It relates to my research project because it's on a similar topic. I can use these statistics that are listed in here, and I can pull some quotes from this author to use in my PIP. That's why it's going to be useful to me. So once you have all of those things in your annotation, you can do a bit of research, put it in the cupboard, come back to it in a couple months and go, all right, I just read this one paragraph and I can understand why it's useful to me, how I'm going to use it in my PIP, and you're ready to go. So I've only asked you to do 3 annotations for the assessment. The requirements for our PIP say an annotated bibliography. There's a little bit of disagreement about what that means because we've had students collect 100+ sources for their PIP, and so I don't know if it's entirely reasonable to expect you guys to keep and create 100 of these annotated paragraphs. That would be thousands of words in itself. It's really good practice for you to do it, but I don't want to say that you have to do that for every source. What I told my students last year is that it's probably more practical once we get to the end stage to take your most valuable sources, and that might be 15 or 20 sources, and create a really good annotation for them so that when you submit your PIP, your most useful sources are annotated, but you're allowed to include sources as well that won't create a huge burden of work for you guys. So I'm going to show you guys a guide that UNSW have put together, which is the most useful thing I've seen for annotations, and I'm going to post it on our Canvas as well. Cool. Okay, so I wanted to show you guys UNSW's guide to annotated bibliographies because I think it's really, really useful. What they do is they provide a sample annotation and they break it down into 8 different sections. This is a really high quality annotation, and I don't think you would necessarily need to include all of this information in every single one of your annotations, but I want to go through it just to show you what the standard might be expected of you at university once you go on to a social science course. So the first part of that is the actual citation, the reference. So that is what you guys have been including in bibliographies throughout high school, right? It's got all the information like the authors, name of the article, where it came from, pages you can find it on. Then, this author has written himself a little 1-sentence introduction. In this article, Trevor et al. Reviewed the influences of pay and job opportunities in respect to job performance, turnover rates, and employment motivation. Sounds like a pretty boring article. But they talk about the research methods used by the researcher. That may or may not be relevant for you guys. I think you'll be reading a lot of academic research that is theory-based or not necessarily contains primary research. So that's okay. This bit, sometimes important, not always. Scope. How broad did these researchers look? Did they look at one tiny town in a Canadian province? Therefore, that research might not be entirely useful for you. Did they conduct a global study where they looked at people from all across the world, where they looked at hundreds of thousands of participants? In which case, it might be much more useful for your research. So scope is a little bit important. Finally, for you guys, usefulness is the most important thing, because if the annotation is going to be useful for you in the future, you want to know how you're actually going to use this source when you come back and look at it. So he says here, the article is useful to my research topic as Trevor et al., the authors, suggest that there are numerous reasons for employee turnover and variances in employee motivation and performance. It still sounds like a really boring article, but limitations, you might discuss there that their scope isn't the same as you, or they're looking at a different gender or a different culture or a different community, so therefore it won't be entirely useful. You can't lean on this for, you know, the central focus of your research, but you can include that information there. Reflection, the last sentence, is really up to you guys, and that's where you might include things like, this source will be really good for me because it has a statistic about a certain topic that I want to use, or I might combine this with a piece of primary research that I've done to create a new synthesis of information. And that last sentence is entirely for you and about how you plan on using this source. So that's an outline of a really good annotation, and I think most of those features you should probably include in your annotations, but there's some of them that will be less important than others. Rad. Are there any questions so far about annotations? Do they kind of make sense? Okay. You're allowed to ask questions even though I'm on video, that's fine. Is it painful? Like, it's obviously more work, I know that. But trust me, if you put in that little bit of work when you're collecting sources, it will save you so much time in the future. Because I've seen a lot of students grab a list of 50 links while they're doing research and go, oh, I'm going to look back at those later. And what happens is you forget entirely why you collected them. You have to go back and read the whole source again, or try and understand, what was I thinking there? Was I going to include that in my first chapter? What use was it to me? Where does it come from? All of this information that is really important for you as a researcher. If you have it, you have it.
In this, should
Yeah.
you like state where you're going to put the information within your research?
That decision's totally up to you, and I would say it's handy to think about that. So when you're doing your research, say, okay, this is great, I'm going to use it in my first chapter, I'm going to use it to support my argument that ... and that you can include, you know, in the last couple of sentences of an annotation, to just say, this has a great statistic that is going to help support my argument, or there's a really great quote from a doctor in here that I'm going to use to help support an argument. Rad, that's annotations. Thanks, team.